I'm your pocket filler, the parlay killer, the Northside thriller. Start the broadcast. Subscribe with a smash. The Gorilla Sports Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome in Gorilla Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bulpin, and it is Saturday, November the 9th. All right, let's recap our Thursday night plays. We ended up going 2-1, won a couple of bucks. We took Lamar Jackson over his passing yard prop. It was a little scary in the first half, but he threw for over 200 yards in the second half, came through easily for us, so that was a monster. Our second play is we took Joe Burrow over 1.5 passing touchdowns. He ended up with 4, so that cashed pretty easily as well. Our one loser is we took Mike Gesicki over 50.5 receiving yards. This one kind of sucked. He ended up with 9 targets, but only 4 catches for 30 yards. And actually, the backup rookie tight end ended up going 6 for 45, so we could have used some of his catches in there as well, or catching any of the 5 missed targets. So that was pretty close. I really thought we could have swept there. Well, 2-1, we'll take it. Now, I want to get this podcast out on Saturday morning as there is a early Sunday morning game in Munich, Germany, and I got to play in that game. I am taking Malik Neighbors over 75.5 receiving yards. Now, he's going versus an awful Carolina pass defense. Now, as a rookie, this guy is leading the NFL among all wide receivers in first in target share. He's first in air yard share percentage, and he's first in the open score by ESPN, which means he's just wide open every time. If it wasn't for Daniel Jones, this guy would be having a record-breaking rookie year. But you get who you get, and you don't get upset, as I got to tell my kids. Now, there's also no Darius Slayton. Now, this guy's got a concussion, and he's actually been a monster over his last 2 games, scored 2 touchdowns at 160 yards. So that's a lot of extra yards, a lot of extra targets and receptions for Malik Neighbors to take over as well. Now, Carolina gives up the 5th most passing yards to the quarterback position, and they give up the 32nd ranked at explosive pass plays, which is monstrous because at any moment, Malik Neighbors could take one to the house. They're also 30th in EPA versus first read target allowed, which again is huge as Malik Neighbors is always Daniel Jones' first read target. This is a great spot. Give me Malik Neighbors over 75.5 receiving yards. My next play is I'm going right back to our boy George Kittle. This guy's been a monster for us this year. Now I got him at 55.5 receiving yards, and I see this has skyrocketed. If you're listening on Wednesday night's live Twitter Spaces, or when I released the Twitter Spaces on Thursday morning, I said the second that this George Kittle prop came, I was going to hit it as soon as I could, and that's exactly what happened. And it's gone up. A lot of people are kind of seeing the same thing I am. Now, DraftKings has it at 59.5. I think FanDuel has it at 61.5, but I think you can do the 60 plus there is probably a better move if you have FanDuel. I think it's just minus 120, but I wouldn't want it too much over that. Now, he's covered this in 4 straight games. He's coming off an 128-yard performance versus Dallas. Tampa Bay gives up the 2nd most receiving yards to the tight end position. The last 2 tight ends have just crushed versus him. Travis Kelce, who's pretty comparable to George Kittle in their skill set, he went for 14 catches, 100 yards versus this Tampa Bay defense. And then the shell of Kyle Pitts, who's kind of an off and on guy. This was an on game for him. He went 91 yards and 2 touchdowns. So give me George Kittle over 55.5 receiving yards. In that same game, give me Brock Purdy over 15.5 rushing yards. Now, this guy's been taking off and running a whole bunch more lately. Now, he's covered this number in 4 straight games and covered it quite easily. He's averaging 33 rushing yards a game over his last 4 games. That's a decent sample size. His last game, he went 56 yards versus Dallas. Tampa Bay gives up the 4th most rushing yards to the quarterback position. That's a great spot. Give me Brock Purdy over 15.5 rushing yards. Our last play is we're going to take Derek Carr, quarterback, New Orleans Saints, over 194.5 passing yards. Now, I found that number at BetMGM. I think on DraftKings is probably the 2nd best number at 197.5. I like anything under 200 here. Now, he covered this last game coming off of his injury, despite they were kind of trying to ease him in as they rushed the ball over 40 attempts last game. Alvin Kamara had 29 attempts. Like, they were trying to run the ball like crazy, and he still went over 230 yards, so that's a good spot. Quarterbacks versus Atlanta have covered this number in 6 out of the last 7 games. Now, we're also getting the coaching firing bump. Now, Dennis Allen just got axed from New Orleans, and usually any team kind of gets up big time after the coach gets fired. So this is a good spot for Derek Carr to kind of show his leadership on this team. He doesn't have a ton of weapons out there, but one of the weapons he does have is Juwan Johnson. Now, again, we talked about this on the podcast that we were going to take over 23.5 receiving yards for Juwan Johnson. Now, this is skyrocketed up to 29.5. 6 yards for a tight end is a big chunk. I still don't mind it there, but if you were listening live, you would have got that good number with us. But that's another one that I kind of like. But those are our 4 official plays for Sunday. And if you're rocking with me, let's roll.